Alright, so I have already talked about the connection establishment part of TCP. Alright, so the connection was already set up. So now let's move on to the next phase. It is known as data transfer. So it's like that I have already set up the communication. Now I just want to get the data from my desired server. So how can I get that? So let's begin. So there are two sides, user and server, as before. So I've already set up the communication and now I'm starting the data transfer. So the very first step of data transfer, you can see right here that the sequence number is 1 and the acknowledgement number is 1. Okay, so why is the sequence number 1 and the acknowledgement number is 1? Okay, so let's check them out, the explanation. So this is basically the previous step of our protocol. So this is basically the connection establishment phase right here. So this is just a screenshot of that phase, the very last scenario. Okay, so you can see right here that the acknowledgement number right here was actually 1. The acknowledgement number of the communication of the packet that going from server to user had the acknowledgement number of 1. So that means the next packet which will go from user to server should have the sequence number of 1. Okay, so we basically continued with this step, this final step here, and we just moved it to our as our first step in the data transfer phase. Okay, so we just move this phase right here, this step right here, as the first step of our data transfer phase. Okay, so this step is under data transfer phase, so there will be definitely some sequence number, acknowledgement number, like we are seeing here, and this I already have explained. So the acknowledgement number at this step was 1, so that's why the sequence number is 1 right here. Actually this is the continuation from the from this step right here, the very last step of the connection establishment phase. So this is the continuation from that step, so that's why the sequence number right here should be 1, as the previous communication gone from server to user had the acknowledgement number of 1. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so the step right here is actually indicating a request from user to server. So what is it actually requesting? So this packet right here is requesting from server to give it the content of that specific server. So basically the user is requesting to the server that, yeah, I want to get the content from www.google.com or www.facebook.com, so could you please give me the contents? Okay, so this is what's happening at this step. So let's move on. Okay, so let's consider that the content size of that specific request is 104 bytes. Okay, what do I mean by that? That means that I want to send a request to someone. So whenever I want to send a request, I will definitely have some words or some type of data in my request. So those words or those data will definitely take some size, right? So the size of that request is actually 104 bytes. So this is just for this example. This will completely be different in a real life scenario, but in our example, let's just consider that the size of that request is actually 104 bytes. Okay, so let's check what happens next. So now based upon my request, based upon the user's request, the server will create a response. The server will respond to the user. So this is the response from the server, and you can see that at the previous step the acknowledgement was 1. Okay, the acknowledgement was 1. Since the acknowledgement was 1 in this step, so right now at this step right here, the sequence number should be 1, right? Okay, so the sequence number is 1, and let's see what the acknowledgement number will be. Okay, so 104 bytes were actually sent from user to server in the previous step, and that communication started from the byte which is numbered 1. Okay, so from the byte numbered 1, the communication started, and it actually transferred 104 bytes starting from number 1. Okay, so that means that the user requested to the server, and that request actually transferred 104 bytes starting from the number 1 byte. Okay, so basically the 104th byte was sent to the server at the very last. Okay, so the 104th byte was sent to the server. So the next expected byte from user should be 105. So the acknowledgement number right on this step, the server will acknowledge that it is expecting the 105 numbered byte from user in the next communication. Okay, so this is what is written here. So in this step, acknowledgement number will be 105, as the server expects that the next communication from the user to the server should have sequence number as 105, because the user already sent all the bytes starting from 1 to 104 to the server. So the server will expect that the next byte it gets from the user should have the sequence number of 105. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so this response right here actually contains the website content. That means the overall documents or images or audio video documents, anything, all the contents that are residing in that specific website. So this response right here actually contains the whole size of that website content. Okay, so let's just assume that the response here contains the size of 253 bytes in total. Okay, so 253 bytes. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so we're just gonna stop up to that. So the response right here is actually the size of 253 bytes, and now we're going to be talking about some flag bits. Okay, so we'll see that what we want to do with this 253 bytes just a moment later, but let's talk about the flag bits at first. Okay, so here just like before, in our connection establishment phase, we did use some flags like synchronization or acknowledgement flags, and here we'll use some flags too. So let's check them out. Okay, at the very first step right here, you can see that there are two different flags working. One is push and the another one is acknowledgement flag. Okay, so the acknowledgement flag should be clear enough right now, because it is actually it did actually receive something from server in the previous step, so it does have something to acknowledge for, so that's why the acknowledgement flag is working. So the push flag is basically the new one. This push flag is working since in this place the data transfer is taking place. All right, the push flag works when data transfer takes place. So we're actually doing the data transfer phase right now, and we're actually sending our request to the server for the required data transfer. That's why push flag is working here. So at the second step, the server actually responded with all of its data to the user. So we are still inside the data transfer phase, and since we are inside that, so the push flag is still working, and the acknowledgement flag is working too, because yeah, it is actually receiving some data from the opposite side, so it needs to acknowledge that fact too. Okay, so basically push flag is used in case of data transfer. So as long as the data transfer phase is taking place, so push flag will always be working. Okay, so let's move on to our next part. All right, so our next part will be connection termination, and we'll be seeing it shortly. And this is basically how the data transfer phase looks like after all the necessary communications are done.